I'm wanting everyone, including myself, to do two things: to take ownership of our lives and to never settle for less than we're capable of. Because I believe if we can do those two things, that's how we live meaningful and impactful lives. That's how we make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the DreamDivers podcast. This is the coaching show that is designed to help people just like you, people who know in their hearts that they were made to do something bigger, more purposeful, and legendary with their lives to impact the world. My name is Ira Davis, the Chief Dream Diver, and I am your dream development coach. What's up, Dream Divers? Today on the podcast, we have my good friend Thane Marcus from LA. Thane Marcus Ringler is a former pro golfer turned speaker, author, coach, and entrepreneur who lives in Los Angeles, California. After competing nearly 4 years as a professional golfer, he transitioned out of the world of golf into his new endeavors. His current work, Thane's mission, is to help others live and work better. He is a speaker, and he speaks about the journey, from the journey to the journey and in the journey. And he is striving to empower this generation to take ownership of their lives and to never settle for less than they are capable of. Thane, what up, brother? Welcome to the show, man.
What's up, Ira? Glad to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, just love your passion in your heart as well. So we definitely share that.
Nah, man, I appreciate it, man. So listen, you and I have been connected on Instagram for quite some time, man. And you've been liking my stuff. I've been liking your stuff. We've been talking in DMs probably for like the last year and a half. And so we finally got a chance to get together, kind of battle of the minds here, mastermind, and letting the world really hear our first conversation together, mano to mano, man. So I appreciate you for being here. So Thane, you do a number of things, but all purpose-driven work. I'm super pumped to hear about what God is doing in your life, and I'm super excited that the viewers get a chance to really come into your world and see this dissection happen right here in front of everybody else. So you run a coaching practice, right, where you're working with the next generation to become great. And you also run the Up and Comers podcast show. And you just launched a book last year. That's pretty dope and phenomenal. So tell us about all three of those purpose-driven businesses, those endeavors, and tell us who they're for and what they're designed to do to impact the world, man.
Totally. Well, I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me on. And I think the main core of what I'm trying to do, and I think that if we're honest with ourselves, all of us are trying to do, is live purpose-filled lives, right? As you are a big believer and advocate for as well. And I think for me, the way I describe it is I'm wanting everyone, including myself, to do two things: to take ownership of our lives and to never settle for less than we're capable of. Because I believe if we can do those two things, that's how we live meaningful and impactful lives. That's how we make a difference in the world. So the coaching practice is that accomplishing that on a one-on-one basis, right? Getting to walk with someone in that journey of really discovering who are you created, equipped, and called to be, and unpacking that, and then also unpacking the limitations, the obstacles, the development of new habits that break old habits. And in the process that we need oftentimes accountability and objectivity, which is what a coach's main role is, right? Is to hold a mirror up and say, this is who you are, because a lot of times it's hard for us to see. And then with the book, it was really kind of taking all of those experiences of playing golf my entire life and then professionally for 3.5 years, and putting words around those experiences, not only for others, but really I was probably the main beneficiary of it, because now I'm taking these experiences I've had, now I'm putting ideas to them and synthesizing the two to where now it just sinks in so much deeper for me and helps me live that life that I really want to live. So I think that's been a really fun journey. And then now really trying to speak to that a lot more in different engagements and building out different materials around really self-awareness and self-discipline, as those are, I think, the two biggest keys to accomplishing it. And then the Up and Comers show has been a really fun journey. Started out as a passion project 3 years ago with my co-host, Adam Sester. He's out of Valdosta, Georgia. And it's really turned into a beautiful endeavor of just getting to unpack other people's inspiring stories of their life and through interviews, and then also just sharing more about like the journey, right? The journey of becoming. I think a lot of times we hear from people who have arrived and accomplished something and they're looking back on it, but we really wanted to speak to, hey, what's it like in the process of getting there? Like, what's that journey like from the actual journey of becoming? And really, we're in that our whole lives, if we're honest with ourselves. So it's not an age specific thing, but it is fun to speak to that.
Man, no, that's phenomenal. So I'm excited to really talk about the journey from where you were as a pro golfer and where God has brought you to, because I want the viewers to see how you turn that problem, that pain, into a purpose-driven empire, man, that just spews life and value for the world from that place that was once pain, man. So bring us back to the beginning thing, before the podcast, before the speaking and the coaching and the book. What were you doing? Where were you? And what happened, man?
Yeah. Well, my whole life, I love sports. I was a competitor, and I just wanted to win. I wanted to be the best at everything. But golf was the avenue that kind of made the most sense to me, especially as a kid, because I had 100% ownership. I didn't have to rely on teammates or anyone else. I could control it, which was, foolish and naive and young. But that was why I gravitated, I think, towards golf. And I did have a pretty successful junior career and got to play in college, and God opened the door to pursue it professionally. But really the journey is failure. Like, that is the real story in the simplest way. And, I think any challenging endeavor, the chances of failure become higher and higher the higher up you get in it. And the average time it takes people to get to the PGA Tour is 7 to 10 years. So I knew it was going to be a long road. But the early years of playing professionally were just a lot of failure, a lot of untapped potential. I was getting beat by other players that objectively I had better skills than they did, but they were performing better. And it was so frustrating because I had to come to terms with my own mental weakness and my own failures and learn from those experiences to try and find a way to succeed. And the thing that's really humbling to look back on now is that the entire book and the entire career that God has me on now is all based on failure, of saying like, oh yeah, I actually didn't accomplish what I set out to. And what I love about what you talk about a lot and what your heart is in this is that failure is actually a really good thing. It is. It's actually not an enemy. It's a friend, because it's teaching us the lessons we need to learn to be successful. We always learn what not to do before we learn what to do. And we just need to embrace that. It's not to say we're going to glorify failure, by no means. But I think we should see it as the tool that it is. And to be honest, I didn't have the results that I really wanted to as a professional. I got to play on the One Asia Tour for 1 year, but never capitalized and didn't keep my status. And then facing an injury the second half of my career for a year and a half, I had a muscle strain that just kept coming back, and we couldn't figure it out for the longest time. And so those were some of the trials that God really used to grow me, because it sucked. Like, it's not fun when you're trying to make a career out of golf and you can't play golf because your body isn't making it. And there's all these questions, all these doubts, all these fears, anxieties. Did I would just waste 20 years of my life into this sport that no longer is going to work out? I'm already 4 years behind on my peers. What am I going to do? Like, I don't have these skills that are on paper that other people look at for jobs. All of these doubts and fears that are very human and logical and normal, right? But they're a part of the journey. And in the moment, it never feels good. And it didn't. It felt horrible. So that was the story of failure is really what the journey was. And becoming more familiar with myself through having to face and come to terms with my own failure in setting out what I really wanted to accomplish.
Man, listen, it's nothing like feeling like you are playing from behind, right? Feeling like you're playing catch up in your life, right? There are glimpses of greatness that you saw in you, but it always felt like you were somehow handicapped, right? Right, and that's golf language, right? So It always felt like you were handicapped in some way, that there was a barrier standing between your skill, your level, and where you thought you were supposed to be, right? And so, there are a lot of people out there who have and will experience that same thing. And a lot of times, like you grew up thinking that you would be great at this one thing, and when God turned the tables on you, right, you had a choice to make. You could either let it break you or let it build you, right? And so what was that deciding moment where you decided, okay, am I going to stay broken, stay stuck in my misery, figure out how many other people I can blame for my injury or for my career, or come to God and say, okay, you would only allow me to be broken to build me. So what are we building? And God, make me over into the man that you want me to be. What was that moment, that conversation? Was there some depression there? Was there some, what was that like for you, man?
Yeah, no, I love this. I think it's a really important part of the process for everyone, and myself included. And the quote that came to mind when we were talking is, I think John Wooden said, failure isn't fatal, but failure to change might be. And failures are a waste. They are a failure if we don't learn from them and use them and grow from them. And so I think it's a massively important part of it. And for me, it's kind of looking back on it, it was really a grace of God that he let me go through this, because, I think my pride of having to admit like a failed golf career without an excuse like an injury would have been really hurt, So I'm gracious. God's gracious in that sense. But for me, it was really thinking about, okay, what is God created, equipped, and called me to be as a person? And when I looked at my skills and the way I've been wired and the experiences thus far, it made more sense to me after it took a couple months of meditating, of speaking to friends, to counsel, to wisdom, and it really became clear that I could be more effective in the world outside of golf than within it. And that's because I think that I wasn't being very effective in the world of golf. I was more isolated. I was more of a lone warrior trying to chart my own path. And those weren't helpful for me or for others. And so I think in looking back on that, that's one of the things that God made clear, is that there's something else, and I think that's what's so beautiful, is that in that moment, in that process, it wasn't necessarily one moment, but through that time of like releasing control and just trying to walk with open hands, because we're always trying to hold on to things, right? Like we're trying to make things happen. We're trying to force the issue. We're trying to make sure we don't lose something. And all those things are us like gripping it with closed fists. And God really, the way he's designed us, I believe, is to walk forward by faith with open hands, saying, I'm going to move forward, even though I don't know the future, but I'm going to keep my hands open because it may be something that I don't even know. And it always is different than we thought it was going to be, right? It's always different. And we don't know until we go down that road. Because I think one of the things, Ira, that I really learned in this time, and that has been so helpful for me, and thinking about it now and even sharing with others, is this idea that failure is a dead end, right? It's a road with a dead end. And we're so scared of dead ends, because if we go down a road and we hit a dead end, that means we have to go all the way back down the road to the starting point again, right? And that's never true. It really isn't, because what happens is once we travel down that road, what happens at the dead end is that we get to take a few steps back, pivot, and then start going down a new road with all of the experience we've gained up to that point. And so that journey of going down any road is giving you valuable lessons and experiences that will lead to the next road, whatever that is. If it's this, great. If it's not this, great, because now you're more equipped for whatever's next. It's kind of like a leveling up. And that's what gives us the confidence and the courage to say, you know what, I don't know how this is going to work out. I know that failure is probably highly likely. And I'm going to be okay with that, because the pursuit of that excellence, whether or not I reach it, is going to create the person that I need to be for what's next. And honestly, like hearing that is one thing, but living that is another, because it's a lot harder to live that. And it sucks. Like I want to relate with everyone. Like I'm not trying to over glorify this process. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be fun, but it's worth it because of who we are formed and created and shaped into from that process.
Yo, fire. A lot of people who are listening right now are at the edge of something that's coming to an end. Most of you who are listening feel that shift in your heart, that God is maneuvering you towards figuring out what that legendary thing that you were supposed to do in the first place. So many of you are either in failure, right? Something just ended, God's about to end it, or you're already on the other side of that and you're already building. So we can all relate in some way, shape, or form. So my question for you is, while you were in your golf career and you were kind of, trying to play catch up and you're like, man, I should be here and I'm not here. Was there something in the back of your mind that says, you know what, Thane, I don't really think this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, but this is all I know. This is all I have. I would be a fool to walk away from it. Was there something in the back of your mind that says, you holding on because this is all you have to hold on to? And then my second part to that question is, when it ended, were you secretly relieved?
Yeah, those are really good questions. Very perceptive too. And you know what's funny is I didn't recognize it in the moment, but I did. I did have that sense, that intuition about it. And really only now, I recently played in a father-son golf tournament this last year. And it was fun to get back into competition and play with my dad and all those good things. But what was interesting is I really discovered kind of a new layer to this, and that when you play in a golf tournament, you wake up super early and you're always tired and you're like, trying to drag out of bed. Right. And so that morning for the father-son tournament, when I woke up at like 6 a.m. and got out of bed being really tired, there was that little bit of, and then I finally recognized that is the key, right? That little, means this isn't where I've called you, right? It's not saying that, look, like I love playing golf. I love playing with my dad. But for the first time I realized that's been there. That was there in the professional days, right? I'm like, I have to, and then you get going, you're like pumped about it. But that's such a great like gut level, body level response of like, look, this isn't where I've called you. Even though it's helpful and useful, but I think recognizing that I wasn't intuitive enough to really understand or sense that. But I think the important thing to also mention is that we do have to give whatever pursuit we're on time, right? You can't know something over a month or two. You really have to be in it for a year or two to really understand it and know and give it a fair enough shot of like whether or not this is your calling or where you feel most gifted or what you can be used in. So I think there is this tension of, you do need to be in something for a long enough time to really properly, fairly evaluate it. But then comes the tension of, am I still trying to discover new things, or am I just holding on to what's familiar? And that's a real tension of like, when is that right time to say no if it's the wrong thing? And I think that is a discernment piece. And one of my friends have been encouraging me even now the most is to drop from the head into the body, because our bodies and our gut and our intuition often knows in advance of our mind. And so we can logically think through things, which is helpful. But if we can understand really what that gut level intuitive sense is about something, we can probably make that decision more confidently, more effectively. And for me with golf, it did take a while, because I did enjoy it. And it was one of the hardest things I could imagine doing. And that's what got me fired up about it. It wasn't necessarily about golf. It was about the challenge of it. And some of that's pride as well. And so it was an interesting journey, because there's always those questions and those doubts. And it's a very isolating journey. So it was a lot of self-discovery in that, which now is so ironic because I see how God used that to do all the things I'm doing today.
Yeah, no, man. And I asked that question because for me, while I was a Marine, prestigious job title. You tell somebody you're a Marine, you tell somebody excuse me to my listeners who don't get offended, but if you tell somebody you're in the Army, people are like, oh, okay, you're in the Navy, oh, you were a Marine, man, what? Are you? Yeah. Right? So it was a prestigious title to have, to be a Marine, but I knew secretly inside of me that I only really enjoyed about 10% of what I was doing, which was the culture, inspiration, and impact. The job, you can keep it, right? Not saying it was a bad job, but it wasn't suited for what God wanted me to do, right? So, and I felt secretly in my heart that like, man, I can't keep doing this, but I'd be a fool to walk away from something that's paying me benefits, housing, taking care of my family, all this good stuff. And where I'm going to go, where would I go, right? Yeah. Outside of this, no education, no money, where would I go? And so what happened was God had to push me into purpose, right? So he used a mistake that I made to reposition me for where he wanted me to be. But here's the key thing is I needed the experiences of the Marine Corps to shape who he was pushing me to be. Right. So don't think that even though you may be positioned somewhere right now that you know is not purpose, God is about to use all of that training that Dan and you talked about, right? All of that failure. He's going to use all of that as he positions you, because he said, I needed you to get a muscle on this bicep, on that bicep, some back muscles in that failure. So now when I put you over here, Thane, right? Ira, DreamDivers that are listening, now you have everything that you need, right? From the place where you weren't supposed to stay, right? To do what you're about to do, what I've called you to do, man. So, listen, you just gave me the title of this episode, man. It's going to be about failure, right? And that's organic. That's just you and I just talking. But I think it's such a powerful thing to recognize that God is going to use those misdirected moments in your life, right? That were on purpose, right? To push you into purpose, man. So I love it. So how did you get from, okay, my career in golf is over, to this new guy that God was remaking, reshaping, and turning from broken, right, into something beautiful, into a purpose-driven entrepreneur? How in the world did you connect your pain to your purpose and create a purpose-driven business?
Yeah, no, it's good. I want to just underscore what you said, because I think it's so beautiful just a second ago, that I really think that this process is never over in life, right? Like, this is not a one-time event. This is a continual event. And the more we can embrace that, the more we can keep moving forward in life, because there's never a time where God's not calling us deeper, like straight up, and that's one of the best blessings of life, is that hope that forward progress isn't a finished process. It's like, we're going to keep moving forward. That's never finished. He's never done with us. And that's the greatest hope I think there is in life. So this process of being broken down to be built back up is going to continue. It's still happening today for me, so I think just an embrace of that cycle and the importance of it, and the different phases of that is really helpful. But today it's really interesting. I never could have planned any of this, and that's why I'm so confident that it's God, not me. And but for me, it was just taking one step at a time. Like, honestly, the first step was like, okay, is it golf or is it something else? And that was a 2 to 3 month process of really seeing how well I could think through this or sit with it. And like I said, that key question is, who is God created, equipped, and called me to be? And I really felt this call to be a voice to the next generation. I'm like, okay, what the heck does that mean? I don't know. And so, I think this other thing to highlight is the difference between anointing and appointing. And this is kind of a biblical thing, but when God anoints someone like King David, it took him 16 years or whatever before he was appointed king. So there's a space between that calling and that appointing where you're actually in that position that is so important. And if we can just recognize that that's the time being prepared for what that is, that in God's timing, we're actually going to be successful when we're appointed, not in our timing when we think we will, and we'll actually end in self-destruction. So I think understanding that patience and persistence is really the process of becoming, that we have to be patient and persistent in being prepared for what God has and for that appointing when that time's right. And for me, that's been a constant focus for me, because I can see the ways he's equipping me through this time, but the finish line isn't necessarily in sight. I don't see the final conclusion of that, and there won't be a final conclusion, but you get what I'm saying. So it started out by, okay, where's the value I can add to people right now? What does golf give me uniquely, skill set wise, that other people need help in? And the big keys were discipline, right? Discipline and strategic thinking, and also optimization of performance. Those were things that as a professional athlete, I had to drill down and instill to the max, because my career depended on it. So I started out this coaching practice by targeting a handful of friends that I thought could be benefited from it, and just try to say, hey, I've got this idea. I want to develop this practice. Would you be willing to walk alongside me in this and just learn? And it proved the value. It kind of developed my systems, and then we started going down that path. And meanwhile, I was writing the book and finishing that and trying to see that through. We were still doing the podcast, and I also was trying to find ways to also provide along this. And that's where the coffee business came from. I was a part-time barista in the off season and thought it'd be cool to still have a foot in the coffee world, but make a little more money for my time. and starting a small business would give me really tangible small business experience. I could better provide value to my clients and teammates I work with. And so I think all of these things were like, well, once I do this step, then what's the next step? Okay, this. And what's the next step? Okay, this is the next step. And the funny thing is, like, from a logical human sense, it doesn't make sense. But from a bigger picture and divine sense, every next step made sense. And God's used each of those steps, even though from an outside perspective, they weren't always logical. They all added up to where we are now. And it's just, I think, the beautiful dance of life.
Man, and a lot of people listening forget that preparation phase, right? First, you are called. First, you recognize who you've been called to be. And then God will give you your purpose and your dream. But before you take off in preparation, you must say yes, right? Yeah. God could have said, Thane, I want to use you as the voice of the next generation. And you could have been like, yeah, right, God, not me, right? You could have been like Jonah and been like, okay, yeah, I'm going the other way. You know what I mean? Like, so the first thing you have to do is in the dream phase, right? As I teach it in the DreamDivers process, right? We have dream, prepare, dive, and land. In the dream phase, God will show you your dream, right? And he will show you your purpose, and you have to accept it, right? That's the anointing phase, right? Then you have to go into preparation, right? How do I take what God just shown me and get my mind right, my heart right, my spirit right, my business acumen right, my skill sets, my talents, refine those things, and then take baby steps into the industry that God has called you in, right? And then once you get about 80% prepared, now it's time to execute, right? It's time to go full throttle, dive head first into that dream, man, and you're going to watch how your yes and your preparation created the place for God to now say, okay, you're ready to dive. You're ready to execute, and the doors are going to start to fly open because you did the work, right? I want you guys to hear what me and Thane are talking about is don't think that the day you get to dream is the day you're supposed to execute full throttle, because that's going to be, you're going to abort your dream before it even has time, before you even become, because real talk, when God gave you the dream, he gave me the dream and our purpose, I was not the man that I am today.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear, right? 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I was not this dude. Trust me. And my friends will tell you, my family, like people see me now on social and these places, like you was a different dude 3 years ago. Like, who was this dude? Right? And I'm sure the same is for you. Talk about that preparation phase of how God really created the thing that the world sees today.
Yeah, it's massive. And it's always like deeper. Like I said, I love, I actually opened my book with this quote from Muhammad Ali. He said, the man who views his life at the age of 50, the same as he did at the age of 30, wasted 20 years of his life. And it's like, we're always going to be changing. And I think Churchill said that if to grow is to change, then to be perfect is always be changing. It's like we're gonna always be changing, I think, in this process. But I love what you just provided, Ira, because you gave a great roadmap to this whole process. I think what you said is first you're like called, right? You have to sit with yourself and understand what you're called to. Then you have to say yes. I think highlighting that is one of the most important steps, because you always have to say yes, which is still a sacrifice and a choice, and we can't skip that. You have to do that. And then you go into the prepare stage, right? Which is usually longer rather than shorter. And
too long.
It's always, right? And then it goes into the appointment, right? When you've been put in that position, and then it comes into execution, because it doesn't stop. You have to now execute consistently and in a disciplined way over time to really bring that into fruition. And then I think on the other end of that, maybe in the life cycle of it is like, then it's a passing on to the next, right? Because I think the way that we, as any leader, the way any leader has a downfall is if they aren't successful in passing it on to those to come, right? Because that's just as important as creating it in the first place. And that's something that I'm worried about for myself, is I want to make sure that it never becomes a Thane show, so much so that I failed my responsibility and duty to pass it on, whatever it is, you know. But in the prepare phase, man, it's really interesting, because the second you think you know something, you don't, right? So it's this constant like understanding that everything is so much more than I ever thought. And I'm constantly learning how much more it is, whether it be with God or work or discovering myself or whatever it is, there's always more. And that has to infuse me with a constant humility and understanding that I don't know it all and I never will. And that what I have has been given to me more than I've earned. And I love the quote from Bill Simon. He said, "I was born on third base and thought I hit a triple." I'm like, man, that's me, like I didn't get to choose where I was born, my family I was born into, the opportunities I often had, like all of those are gifts. And I'm not going to feel shame and guilt for that, but I'm also not going to take pride in that because that's me. So I'm going to use it to the best of my ability. I'm going to be responsible to steward that well and take ownership and never settle. And so the process of preparation, man, is just, it's new and old at the same time, right? Saying like, what new things can I learn and discover with where I'm at right now? But how can I not just chase novelty and fall in love with the daily rhythms, duties, and disciplines that I need to fulfill that long-term goal? Because long-term goals like never happen overnight, like we said, right? And you have to every day sacrifice something in the now for the future.
That's huge. Sacrifice it now for the future. I tell my son every day before I drop him off at school, the quote, I don't know if Les Brown originated or whoever originated, but if you do what's hard now, your life will be easy later, right? If you do what's easy today, you're going to struggle, my man, you're going to struggle later on. So do it right the first time, do it the way it's supposed to be done. So later on, you can reap the fruit of your labor, right? So 2 questions, man, that I want to ask you right now is, number one, when you first started out in your coaching practice and writing the book and the show, who told you that you had lost your absolute mind, right? That what you were doing, your dream was too big? And number 2, was there ever a time that you wanted to just quit, right?
Yeah.
So those 2 questions.
Well, I just wanted to read a quote that I love recently to just underscore what you said again. This guy, Ed Zhao, who is an older professor, and he said, you don't get a quick return creating value for the world. You get a quick return doing something that doesn't matter.
You got to send me that one, baby. You got to send me that one.
Oh, man. It's just like everything takes time. But yeah, I think that there were many, I really do think that probably the more common experience for all of us when we're pursuing what we feel called to, we're gonna experience probably more pushback than less, because that's part of, I think, the refinement of walking by faith is like, look, it's not going to make full sense, but I'm still going to walk forward because this next step at least makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it's strengthening us in that. But yeah, I think, it is a very non-traditional path that I took, and that's not to say that a traditional path is bad. I think both serve their purpose and they are useful depending on who you are. I felt very certain that because of the disciplines that golf had given me and the motivation I had, the drive I had, that a non-traditional path was best for me. That may not be true if you're watching this. It may be true. I don't know. It's kind of for you to discover. But the overarching message is you shouldn't base your decision on the human logic, especially those around you, right? And that's where teachability has to be paired with discernment. I have a whole chapter in my book about this because teachability is really important to growth for all of us. We have to be teachable. We have to be humble and know that we don't know it all. But there comes a point in time in our own development where we have to start discerning which voices deserve an ear and which ones don't. Because not all voices are created equal. All humans are, but all voices should be weighted based on their tie-in to you and their own experiences and knowledge that they've gained, right? So this discernment piece of, okay, what can I not be closed off to, but what can I accept or deny based on where I feel I'm heading? And so that was something I had to constantly do, especially earlier on when it doesn't make sense and I don't know like where the bills are going to come from, and it's all new and it's somewhat like a new path. And even the hardest ones with family, right? When family is unsure, and it's not that they were supportive, but they're questioning, and like then I'm questioning, like, okay, I don't know. And so I think it's one of those things, like with walking with hands wide open, then I get to be like, I'm going to keep going. But if the door closes, I'll go somewhere else. I just don't, I think this is where it is, And so far the door hasn't closed. So
Man, thank God for that, right?
praise God. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, has there ever been a concrete time where you said to yourself or to a significant other or a partner, man, I don't know if this is going to work, right? You know, this is probably the lowest we've ever been in this pursuit of this dream and this purpose. Um, it might be time to go get a regular job. Like, have you ever come to that crossroads, and how did you get yourself out of it and over it?
Yeah. Well, the most impactful one for me was actually in golf still. I was playing on the One Asia Tour. It was my fourth event, and it was in Fiji. It was one of the biggest tournaments I played in, the Fiji International Open. Some great players at the event. Matt Kuchar was one of the ones guys there. And it was such brutal playing conditions. The wind was blowing 40 miles an hour. It was a really tough golf course. I fought super hard the first day, was in decent contention, probably like top 30 after the first round. Second round was brutally hard, raining, wind blowing like crazy. And down the stretch, I just gave it away. I wasted away shots and missed the cut. My mom had come out with me on this trip. So here's a scenario. Like, I just missed my fourth cut on the One Asia Tour. I knew that I was going to lose status for the next year. And now I'm in Fiji with a few more days with my mom. And it was the lowest point for me on the entire golf journey, because all I wanted to do was go punch as many holes in the wall as I could. I was so furious. I was so upset that I'd wasted this opportunity again. And now my mom was there, and I wanted her to have a good time, but all I wanted to do was just punish myself for this horrible failure. And I'll never forget that moment, because I think that was the most like helpless and hopeless I'd felt in it. And it's really interesting looking back on it now, because I think we have to get to those places where we literally are at the darkest moment, the lowest low, to really understand what the highest high is like, right? They go hand in hand. You don't know joy without suffering. And I look back on that moment and I see that, part of it was I was just so wrapped up in this thing that I was doing that I lost sight of life itself and the perspective of being human, and that we all fail, and that, all of these other things. And I think coming out of golf now into my career today, like, I haven't had as low of a low yet in my own career, because I think going through some of those experiences within golf helped me see them in a different perspective, so they aren't felt as deeply as they would have otherwise. But yeah, there's been times where I truly don't know how the bills are going to be paid. And I'm like, all right, God, like, there's some things that are coming up due, and I just don't have a clear way to provide right now. So I'm going to be faithful, but I don't know. I'm going to be faithful to do my part, but I just don't know where it's going to come from. And so there's been multiple periods of the time like that. And there is the temptation to go get a regular job, right? And that's a logical thing to think. I think what really does need to boil down, like, am I holding on to this non-traditional pursuit so much so that there's no other option? Because if I am, then this is probably the wrong option. I'm being ignorant and prideful right now. But if I'm holding with open hand and I still feel called to it, even though I'm open to something else, then it's probably a good sign. And that's been an indicator for me, is like, okay, in those moments, am I just avoiding what I don't want to do, or am I embracing what I feel called to do? And I think there's a big difference internally. So we have to kind of evaluate that at the heart level, and then use wisdom and discernment to make that decision for the next step.
No, I love it, man. Wisdom and discernment is really where it boils down to, because everybody's dream divers process and their journey is different, right? And so don't be so stuck on yourself that you can't hear God maneuvering and shifting you within the dream, right? Everybody's process is different. Some people might have to go work a second, a third, or fourth. Some people might be able to go all in. Some people might have to work it as a side, right? So understand that, again, whose voice you are listening to and whose voice you are following, right? Some of us, like myself, have been called to do something crazy, which was to go all in with no safety net, right? With nothing. And I'm like, okay, God, is there any other way we can do this? You know what I mean? Like, I'm begging God, like, yo, let me get a regular job. Listen, I promise you I'll still. And God is like, no, stay still where I have you. because I have you rooted and grounded and I'm building something in you that I can't do if I had second, third, and fourth place in your life. Now, that's not the same for everybody. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it right. It makes you you.
Yeah.
And your testimony unique and your testimony powerful. And you do what he's calling you to do, because ultimately he's guiding you, right? Me as your dream development coach, Thane, as you coach your other people, I always tell people, listen, take what I say as your coach with a grain of salt. Take it back to the Lord and make sure that what you hired me to do for you, and what I said to you, matches with the voice who should be supreme in your head and your heart in the first place. And if you get a different word than what I got, let's talk about it, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm still human. You're still human. But the person, the dream giver, ultimately has the final say, right? So I'm in agreement with everything you're saying, man. So listen, tell us a little bit more about what's in the book and what it's designed to do for the reader by the time they get to the end of the book.
Yeah, no, it was a really fun journey. It originally started out as a book about how golf can teach you about life. And as I wrote it, it turned into much more of a book about how to pursue excellence in any field in life based on the illustrations of playing golf in my professional career. So what the book is based on is this phrase, simplicity on the far side of complexity, which is an interesting phrase to refer to mastery as simplicity on the far side of complexity. And from that, there's kind of this really rudimentary framework or equation or path that we travel in pursuing our own individual mastery, which is simplicity, complexity, simplicity. So it's saying, like, in any development process, whether it be golf, right? Simplicity is learning the fundamentals. What are the base building blocks? What is a golf club? What is a golf ball? What is the point of the game? What are the different strokes look like? And then you start getting from the base foundation of the fundamentals into the complexity of the game, which again is the longest phase, of course, of learning, okay, what are different courses like? What are different conditions like? How do I make this shot out of this lie? How do I use this club differently? How do I interact with how my mind's performing now? And how do I face different circumstances or challenges mentally that affect my physical performance? And endless complexities. But the far side simplicity is the mastery you're pursuing of saying, okay, out of all this sea of complexities, what is the singular best application of this one thing in this certain situation to produce the result that I want? And I think you see this even like with great companies like Apple. I mean, they are that simplicity on the far side of complexity and the beautiful simplicity of their design and their product, and we all love these examples, but the point of the book is to say that we're all capable of our individual version of that. And so it's giving you my story alongside an explanation of kind of each stage of that process with some practical application tools. And it's really, again, based all on failure. So it's about a human just like you.
Yeah, no. And that's the story we all need to read, man, because in the social media age, we don't see humans just like us. We see humans just like the magazine, right? Yeah. And so, man, a story that brings us into a human, story of trials and circumstances and overcoming and triumph is one that we all need in our lives, man, to help us keep moving forward. So, man, listen, real quick before we end today's podcast, tell us what Thane Marcus's purpose is. What is your purpose?
Yeah, my purpose is really to help others live and work better is kind of the short tagline, but really the fundamental purpose of what I feel called to do is to help others and myself take ownership and never settle. I truly believe that change always starts with you. It starts with you and it starts with me on an individual level. But we're never alone in the journey. We get to help each other or have others pour into us to help us in that journey. But we have to stop passing the buck. We have to start understanding that I have to take ownership for my actions, my thoughts, my decisions, and the impact that I'm trying to make in the world. And then I also have to daily make the commitment to not settle, because settling is the easier path, and we're always going to make that choice if we don't make a choice. If you don't make a choice, you're going to settle. That's the way that we default to. So how do we daily commit to not settling for less than we're capable of? Because that's how we make That's how we be the change we wish to see in the world. And that's what I'm all about. And I want to, one of my favorite quotes I said to you earlier was, you teach what you know, you reproduce who you are. And my goal is I need to be this person if I'm ever going to reproduce it in anyone else. And so I don't want to just teach it. I want to be it.
Man, Thane, you have blessed us with your presence today, man, your words, your testimony, what you're doing in your purpose-driven business is an example. It's a blueprint, man, for everybody that's listening, everybody that's watching, on what God can do with your life when you move past the point of failure and move into allowing him to reformat your life, to use it to inspire and to impact people's lives, man. From all of the Dream Divers here at Dream Divers Nation, we wish you nothing but success. We will be praying for you, man, as God enlarges your area of responsibility, your reach, your influence. And, man, we pray that this is the year that everything you touch, man, just turns to gold, and that all of the people that God has called you to speak into, man, they will just come to hear what God is doing in your life and how you're going to use it to help them get to where they're going to be, man. So I appreciate you. Any last and final thoughts for all the Dream Divers that are listening and watching?
Well, I just want to say thank you for those kind and generous words. And man, it's so encouraging to be around others who have the like mind and the like spirit and are really trying to make a difference, because we can't do it alone. So I am with you in this journey as well. And it's great to have brothers and sisters doing the same. The final words is just, I think, have a lot of fun along the way. That's the number one thing that I didn't do well in golf, is I didn't enjoy the ride. I really put way too much pressure on myself, way too much responsibility, and tried to force the issue. And it sucks the joy out of my own life. And then it also reduces the impact I can have in the work I'm doing or the other people's lives. And so, there's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of suffering and hardships ahead, but man, with joy, when we can live out of joy and in joy, and enjoy the process for what it is, seeing the beauty in every day and every step, that's what brings the fullness of joy for our lives. And so don't forget to have a lot of fun along the way.
Love it. Thane, where can everybody find you and support you, man?
ThaneMarcus.com is my website. That's kind of HQ for everything. TheUpandComersShow.com is the podcast. And then on the socials at Thane Marcus is the best place to reach out and say hi.
Okay, where can they grab your book, brother?
Yeah, so it's on pretty much any book platform, Amazon. It's on my website, ThaneMarcus.com. So definitely check it out, and would love to hear what you guys think of it.
Appreciate it, Thane.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much for watching this podcast. I hope it inspired you. Now, I need a huge favor. I need you, no matter what platform you're on, I need you to find that subscribe button, that like button. Leave us a great rating and a positive review. All of your comments, all of your reviews help us continue to make great content just for you.